The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was cold. It was always cold. Una Park had spent 15 years walking these halls, and she had never once felt warm. The walls were made of black stone that came from a dead world, and the ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into shadow. 12 species ruled the galaxy from this place, and humanity was the smallest of them all. Una stood at her podium. It was the lowest one in the chamber, barely raised from the floor. Above her, the other ambassadors sat on platforms that climbed toward the ceiling like steps. The Velen representative looked down at her with 6 cold eyes. The Korath ambassador's crystal face showed no emotion at all. They had been ruling the stars for 10,000 years. Humanity had only joined them 3 centuries ago. "The matter is simple," said High Arbiter Tollum. His scales were gray with age, and his voice echoed through the chamber like stone grinding against stone. "Human expansion beyond the Vega boundary is not permitted. The Council has decided. The resources in that region belong to the Korath Collective." Una felt her hands tighten on the edge of her podium. She had prepared for this moment. She had practiced her words 100 times. But hearing the ruling still felt like a knife in her chest. "High Arbiter," she said, keeping her voice steady, "the worlds beyond the Vega boundary were empty when we found them. They were poison to every other species. Our people spent 50 years making them livable. 4 million humans call those worlds home now. They have built cities. They have raised children. They have buried their dead in that soil." Tollum's eyes were like yellow glass. "The Council does not recognize human claims to those worlds. Your people will leave. This is not a request." Behind Una, Admiral Doan Kong stood in silence. He was 60 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved from old wood. He had commanded the Human Defense Fleet for 20 years. He had fought pirates and rebels and things that came from the dark between stars. But he had never spoken in this chamber. Humans of his rank were not permitted to speak. He watched Una fight a battle she could not win, and he said nothing. "Arbiter," Una tried again. "If we force 4 million people to leave their homes, where will they go? Human space is already crowded. We do not have enough worlds. We do not have enough food. You are asking us to create a crisis that will kill thousands." The Korath ambassador made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then perhaps your species should not breed so quickly." Some of the other ambassadors joined in the laughter. Una felt her face grow hot, but she did not look away. She had learned long ago that showing weakness in this chamber was death. "The Council has made its decision," Tollum said. "Humanity will comply within 1 solar year. If you do not, there will be sanctions. This session is closed." The platforms began to descend as the ambassadors prepared to leave. Una remained at her podium watching them go. Not one of them looked at her. Not one of them cared. Admiral Kong walked to her side. "Ambassador," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "There is nothing more I can do." That night, they gathered in the human section of Station Meridian. It was a small area, tucked away in a corner of the great station like an afterthought. The walls were thin, and the air recyclers hummed with age. General Hana Shin was waiting for them when they arrived. Hana was 10 years younger than Doan. With sharp eyes and hands that were rough from years of training soldiers, she commanded every human ground force in the galaxy, and she had never lost a battle. But like Dohan, she was not permitted to speak in the council chamber. Only diplomats could speak. Only diplomats could beg. "I watched the session," Hana said. "They did not even pretend to listen." Una sat down heavily in a chair. "They never do. We are children to them. Insects. Something to be tolerated, not respected." "We could fight," Doan said. Both women looked at him. He stood by the window, staring out at the stars. His reflection was a ghost on the glass. "Our fleet is small," Dohan continued. "Our army is limited by treaty, but our people are not weak. If we had time, if we had resources, we could build something that would make them listen. The treaties forbid it," Una said. "If we build weapons beyond the allowed limits, they will destroy us." Doan turned to face her. His eyes were dark and calm, like deep water. "The treaties only work if we follow them. What happens if we stop?" Hannah leaned forward. "Then we become outlaws. Every species in the council will turn against us." "They are already against us," Doan replied. "They have always been against us. The only difference is that now they are polite about it." Silence filled the room. Outside the window, a Korath warship drifted past, its hull gleaming with weapons that humans were forbidden to build. Yuna thought about her father. He had been the ambassador before her, and he had spent his whole life trying to earn the council's respect. He had died believing that one day humanity would be accepted as equals. She had believed it too once. She did not believe it anymore. "Even if we wanted to fight," she said slowly, "we are not ready. We need years. Maybe decades." Yeah. "Then we need to buy time," Hannah said. "We need to make them think we are weak while we grow strong." Doan nodded. "We play their game a little longer. We bow, we scrape, we let them think they have one. And when we are ready, we stop playing." Yuna looked at her two oldest friends. They had all grown up together on Earth, in a small city by the sea. They had dreamed of the stars together. They had never imagined that the stars would be so cruel. "God, if we do this," she said, "there is no going back. We will be breaking every promise humanity has ever made." Doan's face was hard as iron. They broke their promises first. They killed our people and called it policy. They took our worlds and called it law. He walked to the door and paused. "I am tired of asking for permission to exist." He left without another word. Hannah stood and put a hand on Yuna's shoulder. "He is right. You know he is right." Yuna closed her eyes. She thought about the 4 million people in the Rimward colonies. She thought about the children who would go hungry and the elders who would die in transit. She thought about every insult, every dismissal, every time she had stood at that low podium and been told that her people did not matter. "Yes," she said finally. "I know." She opened her eyes and looked at the stars. "Tell the Admiral to begin. Quietly, carefully, but begin." Hannah nodded and left. Yuna sat alone in the dark room for a long time. The galaxy had treated humanity like dirt for 300 years. It was time for that to change. The Council did not know it yet, but they had just made the worst mistake in their long history. They had given humanity a reason to stop being afraid. 6 months passed like slow poison. The Council placed a blockade around human space, and the suffering began. Trade ships could not pass. Medicine could not reach the outer colonies. Food grew scarce in places that had never known hunger before. Yuna sent message after message to the Council, begging them to allow humanitarian supplies through the blockade. Every message was ignored. When she demanded a hearing, Arbiter Tolim sent back a single line: "Comply with the relocation order, and the blockade will end." On Earth, President Minji Cho held emergency meetings that lasted through the night. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had been a soldier once, before she became a politician. She still walked like a soldier, and she still thought like one too. "How bad is it?" she asked Admiral Doan Kong during one late-night call. Bad Doan replied. His face on the screen looked older than it had 6 months ago. "The outer colonies are running out of basic medicine. Children are getting sick with diseases we cured 200 years ago. If this continues through the winter, we will start losing people." Minji closed her eyes for a moment. "And our special projects. Progressing. But we need more time. At least another year, maybe 2. Right. Then we endure," she said. "We endure and we remember." The memory came sooner than anyone expected. The medical convoy left from Mars on a cold Tuesday morning. 3 ships, unarmed, carrying doctors and nurses, and enough medicine to save 10,000 lives. They flew toward the Vega boundary, where a human colony was dying from a disease that could have been cured with a simple injection. Captain Taiho Lee commanded the lead ship. He was young for a captain, only 32, with a gentle face that made people trust him. He had volunteered for this mission because he believed that even the Council would not stop a mercy flight. He was wrong. The Korath patrol found them 6 hours from their destination. 5 warships surrounded the 3 medical vessels like wolves around sheep. Captain Lee sent every signal he could think of, identifying his ships as humanitarian, unarmed, peaceful. The Koroth commander did not respond. The first shot hit the engine of the rear ship. The second shot hit the medical bay of the middle ship. Captain Lee watched his people die on his view screen, and there was nothing he could do. All ships, this is Captain Lee. He broadcast on every channel. We are unarmed. We are carrying medicine for sick children. Please, stop firing. Please. The Koroth fired again. Captain Lee's ship broke apart around him. In his last moment, he thought about his mother back on Earth. He hoped someone would tell her that he had tried. 1600. People died in the cold dark of space. Doctors who had spent their lives healing. Nurses who had left their families to help strangers. Patients who were too sick to travel any other way. All of them gone in a flash of Koroth weapons fire. The news reached Yuna on Station Meridian. She was eating breakfast when her assistant ran in with a datapad. She read the report 3 times. Then she walked calmly to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left inside her. The council held an emergency session that afternoon. Yuna demanded justice. She showed them the flight records, the distress calls, Captain Lee's final transmission. She showed them the faces of the dead. Arbiter Tolam listened with his cold yellow eyes. When Yuna finished, he turned to the Koroth ambassador. The Koroth Collective claims that the human ships violated restricted space, the ambassador said. His crystal face reflected the lights of the chamber. Our patrol commander acted within his authority. This was a regrettable misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Yuna's voice cracked. 1600 people are dead. Children died because they could not get medicine. How is that a misunderstanding? The council will not pursue sanctions against the Koroth Collective, Tolam announced. The matter is closed. Ambassador Park, you will control yourself, or you will be removed from this chamber. Yuna stood frozen at her podium. Around her, the ambassadors of 11 species were already moving on to other business. The deaths of 1600 humans were not even worth a full hour of their time. She left the chamber without another word. Admiral Kang was waiting outside. I heard, he said. They called it a misunderstanding. Yuna's voice was empty. They did not even apologize. Doan put his hand on her shoulder. Come, there is a call waiting for you. President Minji Cho's face filled the screen in Yuna's quarters. The president looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. But her voice was steady. Ambassador Park, I have given you an impossible task for 15 years. You have done it better than anyone could have asked. But I am done asking you to beg. Yuna felt something shift in her chest. Madam President, recall the delegation. All of them. Every human on Station Meridian. We are leaving. If we leave, Yuna said slowly, every treaty ends. Every trade agreement. Every protection. We will be alone. We've always been alone, Minji replied. The treaties were a lie. The protections were a joke. At least this way, we can stop pretending. Yuna looked at Doan. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something she had never seen before. Not anger. Something deeper. Something that had been waiting 300 years to be set free. And then what? Yuna asked. Then we become what they have always feared we might become. Minji leaned forward. We become ourselves. The evacuation took 12 hours. Human diplomats, staff, engineers, traders, all of them packing their belongings in boarding shuttles. The other species watched with confusion at first, then alarm. No one had ever walked out of the council before. To do so meant abandoning everything. Arbiter Tolam sent 14 messages demanding an explanation. Yuna deleted each one without reading it. The Koroth ambassador tried to block the shuttle bay. Doan Kong's security team moved him aside without a word as the last shuttle lifted off. Yuna looked back at Station Meridian through the viewport. She had spent 15 years of her life in that place, fighting for scraps of respect that were never going to come. Part of her wanted to feel sad. She did not, Ambassador, the pilot said. We have cleared the station. Where do we go? Yuna turned away from the window. Home, she said. We go home. And then we get ready. The pilot nodded and set the course for Earth. Behind them, the Galactic Council called emergency session after emergency session, trying to understand what had just happened. They sent threats. They sent warnings. They sent offers of negotiation. Humanity did not respond. The silence was more frightening than any answer could have been. For 300 years, humans had begged and pleaded and asked for permission. Now they had stopped speaking entirely in the great halls of the Council. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ancient powers of the galaxy felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt afraid. 2 years of silence. 2 years of nothing. The galaxy had never known anything like it. Human space became a black hole of information. No ships came out. No signals escaped. The border patrols reported nothing but empty darkness where human vessels used to travel. It was as if an entire species had simply disappeared. Intelligence Director G1 was the Velen hegemony's greatest spy. He had toppled governments and started wars with nothing but information. But humanity had become a puzzle he could not solve. The probes are gone, he told the Council during a secret session. Every single one we sent into human space, gone. No signals, no wreckage, nothing. They have either destroyed them or captured them, and either option is troubling. Arbiter Tollem shifted on his platform. They are dying in there. Their economy cannot survive without trade. Their people cannot survive without medicine. This silence is the silence of a species in collapse. Guan's 6 eyes blinked slowly. With respect, Arbiter, I do not believe that. Humans do not die quietly. If they were collapsing, we would hear screaming. We would see refugees. We would see something. He paused. This silence feels different. It feels like waiting. The Korath Admiral Veth spoke from his corner of the chamber. They are building weapons. They must be. Why else would they hide? They cannot build weapons, another ambassador said. The treaties limit their technology. They do not have the knowledge or the resources to create anything that could threaten us. The treaties. Veth made a harsh sound. They walked out. They broke every treaty when they left. Why would they follow weapon limits that no longer apply to them? The chamber fell silent. It was a thought no one wanted to consider, far away in the Sol system. Humanity was transforming. Admiral Doan Kong stood on the observation deck of Shipyard 7, a massive construction facility hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Before him, hundreds of ships were taking shape, their hulls gleaming with metals that had been mined from the asteroids around them. These were not the small defense vessels. The galaxy had known. These were warships, real warships, built without limits and without fear. How many? President Minjicho asked. She stood beside him, watching the work with eyes that burned with quiet fire. 200 combat vessels by the end of the month, Doan replied. Another 300 within 6 months, plus support ships, carrier vessels, and the special projects. The special projects, Mingi repeated. Show me. They took a shuttle to a smaller facility, hidden even deeper in the asteroid field. Inside, scientists and engineers worked on things that had been forbidden for 300 years. Dr. Youngji Kim led the weapons research division. She was a small woman with wild hair and the focused eyes of someone who had not slept in weeks. She showed them her creations with the pride of an artist. Plasma lances, she said, pointing to a massive cannon being assembled by robots. 5 times more powerful than anything the Korath have. We figured out how to stabilize the reaction by using magnetic bottles that pulse instead of holding constant. Simple, really, once you stop following the old rules. She led them deeper into the facility. Kinetic accelerators. We can turn a piece of rock into a weapon that moves at 3% of light speed. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can survive it. And the defense systems? Doan asked. Yoonji smiled. Better than defense? We have created shields that learn. Every time they get hit, they adapt. By the 3rd shot, they become almost impossible to penetrate with the same weapon. The enemy will have to keep changing tactics, and we can change faster than they can. President Mingi touched one of the weapons, feeling the cold metal under her fingers. How did we never build these before? Because the treaties forbade it, Yunji replied. And because we believed the treaties would protect us. Her smile faded. They killed my brother on that convoy. He was a nurse. He had never hurt anyone in his life. Mingi nodded slowly. We will not forget them. Any of them. On Mars, General Hannah Shin was building an army. The training camps stretched across the Red Plains, filled with soldiers who had volunteered from every corner of human space. They were not just young people fresh from school. They were factory workers and farmers and teachers. People who had decided that enough was enough. Commander Somi Yu was one of Hannah's best officers. She was 35 years old, with scars on her hands from a childhood spent working in the mines of the outer colonies. She trained her soldiers without mercy because she knew what mercy looked like when the enemy had none. Again, she shouted as her squad practiced close combat for the 100th time. You think the Korath will give you a break? You think they will wait while you catch your breath? Again, the soldiers groaned but obeyed. They trusted her. They knew she would never ask them to do anything she would not do herself. Late at night, Hannah walked through the camps, watching the fires burn and listening to the soldiers talk. They told stories about the people they had lost, the homes they had left, the future they were fighting for. Their anger was real, but so was their hope. We are ready, Somi said, walking beside her general. They do not know it yet, but we are ready, almost, Hannah replied. We need a few more months, and we need them to strike first. Why? Because when we respond, I want the entire galaxy to know that we did not start this war. They did. We are just finishing it. On Earth, in the Great Hall of the United Nations that had been rebuilt after the wars of ancient times, President Mingi Cho addressed the United Human Worlds. Her speech was broadcast to every colony, every ship, every human being in existence. For 3 centuries, we have lived as guests in a galaxy that never wanted us, she said. We followed their rules. We accepted their limits. We believed that if we were good enough, patient enough, quiet enough, they would eventually accept us as equals. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We were wrong. They will never accept us. They will never respect us. Because respect is not given to those who beg for it. Respect is taken by those who demand it. Her voice rose. They killed our people and called it a misunderstanding. They starved our children and called it policy. They expected us to kneel. They expected us to break. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. They forgot what we are. They forgot where we came from. Humanity did not survive ice ages and plagues and world wars by accepting our fate. We did not reach the stars by knowing our place. We are the species that looked at the impossible and said, "Watch us." The Velen Intelligence Service intercepted the transmission. Director Jiwon brought it to the council immediately. He played it without comment and watched the ambassadors' faces as they listened. When it ended, Arbiter Tolam waved his clawed hand dismissively. Words. Just words. They are weak and alone and desperate. This is the sound of a dying species trying to seem strong. Admiral Veth was not so sure. He had studied humans. He had read their history. He knew what they had done to themselves and to their world before they reached the stars. He knew what they were capable of. He stopped begging, he said quietly. That is when humans become dangerous. Tolam ignored him. It was the second worst mistake the council ever made. The first was killing that convoy in the darkness of human space. 200 warships completed their final tests. 300 more were being built. An army trained on the red sands of Mars. Scientists created weapons that broke every rule the galaxy had ever known. And humanity waited. The silence before the thunder. Admiral Veth commanded the largest fleet the Korath Collective had assembled in 500 years. 800 warships. Each one bristling with weapons that had crushed a dozen species before humanity had even discovered fire. He looked at his forces on the tactical display and felt nothing but certainty. Set course for the Vega boundary, he ordered. We will end this human problem today. His officers obeyed without question. The fleet moved like a single creature, 800 ships flying in perfect formation toward human space. They expected to find a broken species hiding behind outdated defenses. They expected an easy victory. They found Admiral Do and Kong. The human fleet appeared on Korath sensors like ghosts materializing from empty space. 200 ships, less than a quarter of VS force. The Korath officers laughed when they saw the numbers. "They send toys against us," one captain said. "This will be over in an hour." Veth did not laugh. He was studying the human ships, and something about them made his scales itch. They were different from the vessels he had seen before. Larger, stranger. Their energy signatures were wrong, too powerful for ships of that size. "All ships hold position," he commanded. "Scan those vessels. I want to know what we are facing." The scans came back, and the laughter died. "Admiral," his tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "their weapons output is... I do not understand these readings. They should not be possible." "Explain." "Each of those ships has more firepower than 10 of ours combined. Their shields are operating on frequencies we have never seen. Their engines are producing power levels that should tear the ships apart." The officer looked up, his crystal face flickering with fear. "These are not the humans we knew." Do Kong's voice crackled over the communication channel. Broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "Admiral Veth, 2 years ago, your people killed 1,600 of mine. Doctors and nurses and patients who had never harmed anyone. You called it a misunderstanding. Your council called it acceptable." He paused. "We call it murder. And we have come to balance the scales." Veth's claws tightened on his command chair. "You are outnumbered 4-1, human. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." "We are done asking for mercy," Doan replied. "We are done asking for anything at all. Today, you learn what happens when humanity stops being afraid." The human fleet began to move. They moved wrong. That was the first thing Veth noticed. Human ships had always been slow, limited by the engines the treaties allowed them to build. These ships accelerated at speeds that made his tactical display scream warnings. They did not fly in formation like proper warships. They scattered like a swarm of angry insects, each one moving independently, unpredictably. "Open fire," Veth commanded. 800 Korath ships unleashed their weapons. Plasma beams and missiles and kinetic rounds filled the space between the fleets. It should have been devastating. It should have destroyed the humans in seconds. The human shields flickered with strange light as the weapon struck them. Once, twice, 3 times. And then the attacks stopped working. The shields had adapted, learned, become immune to everything the Korath were throwing at them. "Possible," Veth whispered. The humans fired back. Do Kong watched from the bridge of his flagship, Ush Remembrance, named for the convoy, named for the dead. He watched his plasma lances cut through Korath shields like they were made of paper. He watched his kinetic accelerators turn proud warships into expanding clouds of debris. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Disable, do not destroy. I want prisoners." Commander Somi, you led the assault wing. She had transferred from ground forces to naval command 6 months ago, driven by a hunger for justice that kept her awake at night. Her ship, the UHS Vengeance, danced through the Korath formation like a blade in the hands of a master. 2 on my left, she called to her wing. 3 more coming from above. Keep them off the Remembrance. Her pilots responded with the precision of people who had trained for this moment every day for 2 years. The Korath threw everything they had at the human fleet. None of it worked. In the first hour, the Korath lost 200 ships. In the second hour, they lost 200 more. By the 4th hour, Admiral Veth's mighty fleet had been reduced to wreckage and retreating survivors. Veth himself stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching the disaster unfold. His officers were dead or dying around him. His ship was crippled, power failing, weapons offline. A human boarding team was cutting through his hull. The doors to his bridge exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through, their armor gleaming with technology he did not recognize. They moved like predators, fast and silent and deadly. Do Kong walked through them. He was not wearing armor. He did not need to. His eyes found Veth across the ruined bridge. Admiral Doan said, "Your fleet is destroyed. Your war is over. You will come with us." Veth's claws twitched toward his sidearm. A human soldier shot it out of his hand before he could move.
Ah!
Veth demanded, "How did you build these weapons? How did you defeat us?" Doan's face showed nothing. "You gave us 2 years of silence, 2 years without treaties, 2 years without limits." He stepped closer. "Did you think we would spend that time crying?" On the surface of 5 disputed worlds, General Hannah Shin launched her ground campaign at the same moment the naval battle began. Human soldiers dropped from orbit in armored pods, landing in the heart of Koroth colonial garrisons. The defenders had been expecting refugees and beaten civilians. They found an army instead. Commander Somi used ground forces hit Vega 7 at dawn. This was the world where the convoy had been heading. This was where children had died waiting for medicine that never arrived. The Koroth garrison commander tried to negotiate. Somi listened to his offer of surrender, then pointed to the horizon. "Do you see that hill?" she asked. "That is where we buried our dead. The ones who did not make it after the blockade. The ones your people killed with their policies and their cruelty." The commander's crystal face flickered with something that might have been fear. The council authorized nothing that matters anymore," Somi interrupted. "We do not recognize the council. We do not recognize your authority. You have 1 hour to evacuate your people from this world. After that, anyone in a Koroth uniform will be treated as an enemy combatant." The garrison evacuated in 43 minutes. Somi walked to the central plaza, where the colonial government building stood. She tore down the Korath flag with her own hands and raised a human one in its place. Then she broadcast a single message to every receiver in the system. "We remember. The Rimward colonies were liberated in 6 days. 5 worlds returned to human control. 4 million people who had been told to leave their homes were told instead that they would never have to leave again." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The Koroth Collective, one of the mightiest powers in the Council, has been broken by the species they had treated like animals. 800 warships destroyed. 5 colonies lost. Admiral Veth himself captured and held prisoner. High Arbiter Tollum called an emergency council session. For the first time in 1,000 years, every ambassador attended in person. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ancient powers of the galaxy gathered not to rule, but to panic.
"How did this happen?"
demanded the Velen ambassador. How did they become so strong? Intelligence Director Giwan stood before them, his 6 eyes tired and haunted. "We underestimated them. We always underestimated them. We saw a young species and assumed they would remain young forever. We gave them rules to follow and assumed they would always follow them. What do we do now?" someone asked. Tollum's scales had gone pale with fear. He looked at the tactical reports, at the images of burning Koroth ships, at the footage of human soldiers marching through colonial streets. "We negotiate," he said, "before they decide to do to us what they did to the Korath." No one argued. Deep in human space, Admiral Doan Kang received the Council's request for talks. He read it once, then forwarded it to President Minji Cho. "They want to negotiate," he said. Minji smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had waited 3 centuries for this moment. "Good," she said. "Then let us teach them what humanity looks like when we stop asking for permission." Unipark walked through the halls of Station Meridian for the first time in 2 years. Everything looked the same. The black stone walls, the cold air, the platforms rising toward the shadowed ceiling. But nothing felt the same. She did not walk alone. Admiral Doan Kong walked on her right, his uniform decorated with medals from battles the galaxy had never imagined possible. General Hannah Shin walked on her left, her presence radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had won every fight she had ever faced. Behind them, an honor guard of human soldiers followed in perfect formation. Their armor was black and gold, built from technology that made the Council's best weapons look like toys. They did not bow. They did not look away. They walked like conquerors, because that was what they were. The council chamber was full when Yuna entered. All 12 species were represented, their ambassadors crowded onto their platforms like birds afraid of a storm. High Arbiter Tollum sat in his usual place, but he looked smaller somehow, older. Afraid Yuna did not go to the lowest podium. She walked past it without a glance and continued directly to the center of the chamber, where no ambassador had ever stood before. She looked up at the beings who had dismissed her for 15 years and she smiled. 300 years ago, you accepted humanity into this council? She began. Her voice was calm and clear, echoing through the ancient hall. You gave us the smallest seat, the fewest rights, the least respect. You told us to be grateful for what we were given. And for 3 centuries, we were. She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. Then you killed our people and called it a misunderstanding. You starved our children and called it policy. You looked at us and saw animals to be controlled, not people to be respected. Arbiter Tollum tried to speak. Ambassador Park, the council is prepared to... I am not finished. Yuna's voice cut through his words like a blade. Tollum fell silent, his scales pale with shock. No one had ever interrupted a High Arbiter before. You expected us to break, Yuna continued. You expected us to crawl back, begging for scraps from your table. You forgot what we are. She gestured behind her at the soldiers, at the admirals and generals who had broken the Korath war machine in a single day. You forgot where we came from. She activated a holographic display. Maps of the galaxy appeared in the air above her, glowing with soft light. Lines had been redrawn. Borders had been changed. We are not here to negotiate, Yuna said. We are here to inform you of how things will be. She pointed to the rimward colonies. These worlds are human territory, permanently. The people who built them will never be asked to leave again. The Vega boundary no longer exists. Human ships will travel where we please, trade with whom we please, and defend ourselves as we see fit. This is unacceptable, the Korath ambassador said. His crystal face was dark with anger. You cannot simply take what you want. Doan Kong spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber like thunder. We not? Where is your fleet, ambassador? Where are your soldiers? Where is your power to stop us? The Korath had no answer. Any species that raises a weapon against humanity will face the full consequences of that choice, Yuna continued. We are not threatening you. We are simply stating a fact. Attack us, and you will share the Korath's fate. Leave us in peace, and we will leave you in peace. Admiral Veth was present in the chamber, brought from his prison cell to witness this moment. He stood among the human guards, his proud uniform torn and dirty, his crystal face cracked from the battle. He had been a hero of his people. He was a symbol of their defeat. And if we refuse? He asked. Yuna looked at him with something like pity. Admiral, you had 800 ships. You now have less than 200. Your worlds are undefended. Your economy is collapsing. You are in no position to refuse anything. She turned back to the council. We have no desire to rule you. We have no interest in building an empire. We only demanded what should have been given freely from the beginning, respect. Give us that, and we will be the finest allies you have ever known. She stepped forward, her eyes moving from platform to platform, meeting the gaze of every ambassador in the chamber. We will share our technology, our medicine, our art and music and stories. We will stand beside you against any threat that comes from the dark between the stars. We will help you build a galaxy that is better than the one you built without us. Her voice softened. But we will never again be treated as less than what we are. We are humanity. We walked out of the caves and into the stars. We survived ice and fire and our own worst mistakes. We did not come this far to be dismissed by species who forgot what strength looks like. She extended her hand toward Tollum. It was an old gesture, a human gesture offered between equals. The question is not whether you will accept our terms. You have no choice in that. The question is whether you will accept us as partners, whether you will build something new with us, or spend the rest of your history regretting what you lost. The chamber was silent. Tollum looked at Yuna's outstretched hand like it was a weapon pointed at his heart. He looked at the other ambassadors, searching for support, for guidance, for anything that would tell him what to do. He found nothing but fear. Slowly, carefully, the High Arbiter descended from his platform. His scales had faded to a color Una did not recognize, something between gray and white. His clawed feet clicked against the floor as he walked toward her. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, ancient and young, powerful and newly powerful, the old order and the new. Then Tolam took her hand in his. Perhaps he said quietly, "We should have done this 3 centuries ago." Perhaps Una agreed. But we are here now. That is what matters. The treaty was signed that day. It was not called the Treaty of Surrender, though. That was what it was. It was called the Treaty of Meridian, and it established humanity as a full and equal partner in the galactic community. The old limitations were gone. The old insults were over. Humanity could build what they wanted, go where they pleased, become whatever they chose to become. In the months that followed, things changed faster than anyone had predicted. Human doctors traveled to worlds that had never seen their technology, healing diseases that had plagued other species for thousands of years. Human engineers shared secrets that transformed starship design across the galaxy. Human artists and musicians found audiences on 100 worlds, their strange and beautiful creations speaking to something universal in every species. The fear faded slowly. It was replaced bit by bit with something else. Curiosity, respect, eventually, friendship. 50 years after the Treaty of Meridian, Admiral Hajin Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity. He was Yuna's grandson, raised on stories of the dark years and the war that ended them. He had her eyes dark and warm and filled with hope. His crew was not entirely human. A Korath officer named Vrel monitored the tactical displays, his crystal fingers moving with practiced skill. A Velan navigator plotted their course, her 6 eyes focused on stars that had once been forbidden. A dozen other species worked side by side with humans, all of them wearing the same uniform. They had received a distress call from the edge of the galaxy. An unknown species was fleeing an unknown threat. They were asking for help. "All ships form up," Hajin ordered. "We do not know what is out there, but we know who we are." He looked at his crew, at the faces of beings who had once been enemies and were now family. "We are the Galactic Alliance. We do not leave anyone behind." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, united and ready. Humanity had walked out of the Council and shattered every treaty in their path. They had been called animals and insects and worse. They had been dismissed and ignored and attacked. But in the end, they had done what humans always did. They survived. They grew stronger. They reached out their hands to those who had hurt them and offered something that the galaxy had never expected: forgiveness, partnership, a future. Built together instead of apart. The galaxy had trembled when humanity walked out. Now it stood beside them, together,